Hello, vamos demócratas, ¿cómo están demócratas en Florida? Le habla Roberto Nava. It's Roberto Nava from the field in Osceola County. We are here today to talk to you guys about the importance of the Puerto Rican vote, the importance of our community, and what the Florida Democratic Party is doing to make sure the Puerto Rican community comes out to vote. This is going to be like a Spanglish community. We're going to be talking en español, vamos a estar hablando en inglés, vamos a estar intercambiándonos. Y quiero que sepan que con nosotros vamos a tener unos invitados de lujo. Vamos a tener al congresista Soto del Distrito 9 aquí en Florida Central. Y vamos también a tener a Representative Amy Mercado with us to talk about our community, about what is being done in Congress for the Puerto Rican community. And to ask a couple questions with us. So I wanted to first tell you my story. I am from Puerto Rico. I was born in New Jersey, but raised in Puerto Rico. And my family had to move to Florida after Hurricane Maria. And this amazing state and this amazing community opened its arms to my family, to my brothers and sisters from Puerto Rico. And we're here today to let you all know that we're going to be fighting for the Puerto Rican vote. So let's get to the conversation. If we could have Congressman Soto and State Representative Amy Mercado join the conversation. Hello, how are you guys doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having us. Gracias.
Really great. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, como le dije, como le estaba diciendo to the audience, we're going to be having a conversation a little bit in Spanglish because we have a lot of people from Puerto Rico directly that are hearing the conversations, and we have people from the state that talk both languages. So yeah. So I wanted to ask both of you, and you guys can decide who answers the question first, but I wanted to ask, what is a piece of legislation or a policy or something that you guys have done that you guys are proud of when it comes to the Puerto Rican community? Le estoy preguntando a Darren y a Rep. Amy Mercado por qué una legislación o algún evento que hayan hecho que ellos se sientan orgullosos. So who wants to go first?
Mujeres primera.
Not Amy.
Not a problem. I can go first. So the legislation that I've actually focused on is, in my opinion, all-encompassing, is more community-based. There were things that I filed as a legislator that were important to my community. I felt whether it was healthcare legislation to protect women's rights, all the way down to actually a bill that Congressman Soto began 10 years ago, actually probably even a little bit longer than that, and it was motor vehicle racing in our county. And I think it affects all of our communities, specifically within the Latino community. The area that I represent is 60+% Latino, so it's going to affect clearly the Puerto Rican community. And at that point, is safety, right? We want to ensure that our streets are safe, that folks aren't getting into accidents, and that we were giving the tools to law enforcement to actually investigate appropriately, and it not be a situation where llamas a la policía, pero la policía no puede hacer nada, right? Wow. Because they're not available, or the situation that was happening is that the legislation wouldn't allow them to actually investigate unless they actually saw the situation with their own eyes. So I think it's more, inclusive, more encompassing, and we've done all kinds of other work that we try to battle against, like the rating of the Sadowski Trust Fund, right? That was very specific to affordable housing and our community, to ensure that as the folks are coming in from the island specific or mainland areas, that they're able to find homes or rentals that they can afford, right? So that's still an ongoing battle. That we've not been super successful in that, but we continue to fight together, and we share that fight with the congressman at a national level.
Amazing, and thank you for that. Soto.
So I would say appropriations is the best way, the way I'm most proud to have helped out the Puerto Rican community in Central Florida. Este es sobre los fondos, porque nuestra comunidad tiene muchas necesidades. So whether it is, there's a place called Point Siena in our district that many Puerto Ricans, including many of my cousins, live in. And when I first got into office, they didn't have a college, they didn't have, the commutes were very long, they didn't have a post office, they didn't have a hospital. No era mucha infraestructura, hospitales, universidades, transportación y otras necesidades en esta área. And we fought to get all that for that community and for Kissimmee, whether it was the Point Siena Valencia College, whether it was the Sunrail going down to those communities to help with the commute, and Kissimmee as well, whether it was getting a hospital down there that we utilized Obamacare funding for, whether it was making sure that they had a post office, actually something we all take for granted, and the Point Siena Parkway. Nosotros mejoramos las vidas de la gente, muchos puertorriqueños en Point Siena, con una autopista nueva, un tren nuevo, una universidad nuevo, con Point Siena Valencia y un hospital nuevo. Y antes este área de Point Siena era muy difícil para vivir. It's getting better over time, and it's helped areas like Kissimmee as well, where there are many of us. I do want to say one other thing, because we're dealing with not only representing our community here in Central Florida, but nuestros hermanos y hermanas en la Isla del Encanto. Y después de Huracán María, nuestra comunidad, incluyendo representante Mercado y yo y su padre, senador Torres, ayuda mucho para las oportunidades por haciendas y cuartos de hoteles en Orlando y Kissimmee, ayudando con acceso de servicios de salud, con trabajos, con asistencia por comida. There were so many needs for so many evacuees from Puerto Rico, our brothers and sisters, when we got the 5 extensions of the hotel program, help with housing, with healthcare, with jobs, and so many other things. And Roberto, you are that next generation that is picking up the torch, having come there during that very difficult time. And look, you're here interviewing us now, you're thriving, and that's part of the legacy we hope to leave.
No, and that's important in the conversation, because como yo vine de Puerto Rico, yo vengo de Calle, Puerto Rico, and we have a lot of people. So Florida is changing, Central Florida is changing, and we're seeing our community that it's growing. Can you guys talk? Can you guys talk to me about that? How has been the Puerto Rican community changing in Central Florida?
Representante, primero.
Muchas gracias. So from my perspective, I got here in 1995, and in the time that I've been here, so 25 years later, right? We've, as a population, I think there's an explosion in the population within the Puerto Rican population. When I first got here, it was hard to identify other Latinos, other Puerto Ricans, and as time has progressed, you see more folks, you see the change socially, you see the change business, right? Economic wise, the stores didn't carry Latino products that weren't even available. We would actually have to, I used to send stuff down here before I moved to my parents. And so that you can tell, that's a tactile thing that we've seen. The congressman has probably seen that and more, right? As legislation happened and as he filed for office before I did, we didn't see people that looked like us. No teníamos la representación estatal o a nivel nacional aquí en la Florida Central que parece como nosotros, que somos latinos, que somos boricuas, que tenemos las mismas necesidades, las responsabilidades que tenemos de familia, porque venimos de una cultura que es bien familiar. En mi casa y mi familia son multigeneraciones, que tenemos distintas necesidades y al llegar aquí no veíamos lo mismo, pero poquito a poquito ahora vemos mucho más y ahora tenemos mucho más electos, algunos del otro partido también, pero más todos los días en el...
And I mean, hasta el 2018 we didn't have a Puerto Rican member in Congress, and now we have Darren Soto. So Darren, ¿qué puedes decirle eso, Darren?
So the main differences now are we're the largest diaspora of Puerto Ricans in the nation, bigger than New York now. We have much more political clout, but we have challenges we have to use that for. And we also have our own unique subculture, our Florida Rican culture that has come about over the last 20 or so years. Hay muchos diferencias ahora. Nosotros tenemos la diáspora más grande, tenemos más poder políticamente y tenemos asuntos para resolver. Y también tenemos una cultura nueva de Florida Ricans. And you really have to look at the history. There was a huge flow of folks, and my family has both the migrations in there down from New York and New Jersey. I was raised in New Jersey. My father was born in Manatí, and my family's from Arecibo. My cousins moved up from Arecibo. So you have these New Yorkers like Amy and I moving down, although I'm from New Jersey, so that means she's tougher than I am. And You have Porros from the island moving up, like my cousins and the ones I mentioned in Point Siena. And so we've made this unique swirl of all of us. And now you have young people who grew up here. They don't know New York,
Right.
they don't know Puerto Rico, they know the culture, but they're Floridians with a flavor and sabor. Y nosotros necesitamos saber la historia con migraciones de Nueva York y Nueva Jersey, de la isla, y hay una mixta ahora con muchos niños que vive aquí y no saben de estas otras áreas. But the representation is probably the biggest part, because we have challenges. We need to raise wages. We need to have better access to healthcare. We need to have more affordable housing. We need to fix the traffic. We need to protect our environment, and particularly environmental justice. And these are issues that it takes folks from our community to understand. Nosotros tenemos asuntos necesita para arreglar, para levantar los salarios, para aumentar acceso de educación y servicios de salud, para arreglar el tráfico y también para proteger el ambiente. So there are things we need to do with this newfound clout, and that's what we spend our time every day doing.
And for that, being importante, like elections are very important. Getting people out to vote, it's very important. ¿Qué rol juegan los puertorriqueños? What's the role of the Puerto Rican community here in Central Florida for the upcoming elections in November?
From my perspective, thank you, Congressman, I see you. From my perspective, it's really important because we come from, like the Congressman said, different areas of the diaspora. So when I got here, there were certain positions that I expected, right, in the collective role of politics, but there were other roles that didn't exist. Like, the school board itself, for example, is not an elected position in all states and or the island. It doesn't necessarily exist. And so as folks come in from all walks of life in different areas as Puerto Rican, there's that one-to-one conversation, and very nurturing and very empathetic, and trying to engage them in the needs that they had as soon as they got here. But then once they're here and a little bit more stable and can kind of get their bearings, would then try to facilitate the information as to how important it is to vote, right? To register to vote, why you want to register, the differences between our parties, because the parties within our state and the island are very different, and they flow different on the island, and the island is more status-based versus partisan that we have, right? So that's a very tactile, one-on-one conversation, and it's, con los cafecitos, vamos a tocar las puertas, hablar con uno, conocimos a Roberto, mira, entra, vamos a un cafecito y explicar. Y hablar cada día de cada persona, con las abuelitas, con los menores. Dos de mis hijos nacieron aquí en la Florida Central. So, lo que ellos experiencian es muy diferente de lo que yo tenía como experiencia en Nueva York, y explicarle la diferencia de lo que nos están viendo ahora que de lo que nosotros vimos anterior.
Right.
Poquito a poquito, persona por persona.
Yeah, right. Puertorriqueños, they vote every 4 years in Puerto Rico, but when they move here, it's every 2 years. So they're confused, and it's
all at the same time. Yeah.
It's normal. So, Darren, what are your takes on this?
So there's definitely an education process that we as local electeds need to commit to and have committed to over the years to help folks. If our brothers and sisters are coming from the north, they tend to know the Democrats are where it's at to help out the Hispanic community and the Puerto Rican community. From the island, the politics are totally different. It's based upon status, and you could even have Democrats in both parties. Republicans generally are more statehooders, and the thing is, though, we have elections all the time. We have special elections for a penny sales tax for education. We should be voting in that. We have a penny that could be there for transportation. We should be voting in that. We have school board members like Representative Mercado mentioned. Nosotros tenemos una responsabilidad para enseñar a nuestra comunidad la importancia y cuántas elecciones. And the thing is, why is this so important? Because it directly affects our quality of life.
Yes, hacerse contar, right? You need to be counted. And so things like the census are just as important, and it's not something that they necessarily see everywhere. Right. But without those dollars, that money that comes from the data that's driven from that census every 10 years, we don't have the services necessary, and it ties us into the political structure that we end up with and the lines and the barriers that we have now, right, as we move forward and potentially gain 2 seats in the next election cycle, or not at the state level because of the count and the census. So those things are important in understanding and sharing.
Un pequeño shout out a todas esas personas que they're working hard to make sure the people in Puerto Rico are doing the census. Up to right now, I think it's 26%. It's very low in comparison with nationwide. So please, puertorriqueños, llenen ese censo. It's important.
Aquí y allá, lo que están aquí, lo de allá.
I will say this, our numbers are better than they were in 2010 in Central Florida, but they're nowhere near where they should be. And on the island, we really need to improve them. Because that's going to affect all those services. Los números de el census are muy bajo en Puerto Rico. Hay un poquito más alto en Florida Central en relación a 2010, pero nosotros necesitamos mejorar. But I do want to say about why your vote counts. In addition to the issues they mentioned about raising our wages and affordable housing and protecting our environment, access to healthcare and fixing the traffic, things that every Central Floridian knows exactly what I'm talking about, including Nuestra Familia Boricua. There is 21 million people in this state, and our last statewide elections were decided by 10,000 votes. There's 1.3 million of us in Florida, just among Nuestra Familia Boricua. And so if you don't think your vote counts, note that elections are decided by 0.1%. Votes count everywhere, but in Florida, it is supercharged. If you don't come out to vote, it could be the difference between whether we elected President Gore, President Bush. See how that turned out for Puerto Rico and for Florida. Or re-electing Donald Trump, which would be devastating to our community, or electing Joe Biden as the next president of the United States and saving the soul of our nation. Esta elección en Florida, nosotros tenemos una decisión con 10,000 votos a 8.5 millón personas. Y nosotros tenemos 1.3 millón boricua en Florida. Nosotros podemos ser el hecho decidido. Nosotros podemos decidir esa elección con Florida con la vota boricua, and everything's on the line. So I really hope everybody gets that.
And thank you for that, Congressman Soto, because my last question is, what's your message for a Puerto Rican who might be thinking of voting with Donald Trump on this election?
So let's talk about just those in Florida for right now, because that's the main audience we need to vote in the presidential election. Unfortunately, our brothers and sisters on the island can't vote in the general election, which needs to change. You're probably working at a small business, maybe at the parks, maybe at the hotels, maybe you're a professional, but none of us are getting paid for the hard work we're doing at the amount that we deserve. We have to raise the wages. That affects so many other issues. President Trump opposes a $15 an hour bill that we passed out of the House. Vice President Biden supports it. Hay muchas personas trabajando en los parques, hoteles, o en negocios pequeños. Joe Biden apoya un salario mínimo de $15 por hora, y President Trump is in opposition. For healthcare, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and yet President Trump is trying to take away even Obamacare. We need to not only make affordable healthcare more affordable, but we need to make sure that there's healthcare for everyone. Nosotros y hay un diferencia claro. Biden va a expandir acceso de servicios de salud, y Trump va a cortar este acceso. Y él está tratando para terminar Obamacare en corte. So then you look at with the traffic, how many people have to drive an hour and 15 minutes? We just passed out an infrastructure bill to help finish I-4 Ultimate, to help with Sunrail and all these, and links and all these other things, so that you can get to your job without having to spend an hour and a half. President Trump isn't going to pass an infrastructure package. Okay. It's a joke. President Biden would pass an infrastructure package to finally fix the traffic for folks who are already not making enough money and have an hour and a half commute. Ustedes están conduciendo sus carros una hora mitad. Necesita para mejorar nuestra infraestructura en nuestros autopistas para reducir nuestro tráfico. Biden va a apoyar un plan de infraestructura nacional para ayuda con el tráfico en Florida Central. Trump, este es un chiste por él. And finally, I'll say, we care deeply about our environment. That's why we live in Florida. We live in such a beautiful state. When I see my fellow Boricua, they're hanging out during Saturday, Sundays out in Kissimmee Lakefront. They're at the springs. They're at the beach. You know what I'm talking about? Socially distancing, of course, wearing masks. But we like to be outside. We like fishing. We like going to the beach and playing our music too loud and playing soccer and all those things. Having so many of our outdoors, because those things are affordable. Going to the Kissimmee Lakefront, going to our beach, those things. But we have to protect those things, as well as clean air and clean water. Nosotros sabemos, nuestra comunidad, queremos estar afuera, en la playa, en el parque, incluye el lakefront de Kissimmee y en nuestro ambiente.
Y que queremos seguir chinchoreando y queremos seguir pasándola bien. Eso es lo nuestro también.
Porque es parte de la familia y parte de nuestra cultura. Y
voy a terminar con este. Biden va a proteger nuestro ambiente. Trump ahora está destruyendo nuestro ambiente por nosotros, por nuestros niños y por nuestros nietos. This is about not only our generation, but future generations.
Representative Mercado, what's your message for those who might be thinking of voting for Trump?
The simplest message is a vote for Trump is a stepping back. You've seen the reality that you're living, especially those that are still migrating, coming from the island, and the treatment that's happening from the island. Those of us that are on the mainland have seen things diminish. So it's incredibly important not to vote for him, to ensure that we move forward. But also, there's a voter protection factor here. We need to ensure that we're voting, we're registering to vote, voting by mail. We need to, we actually have the opportunity to do so here with Florida, fl.dems.vote/mail. We're trying to engage the electorate from all angles. Please do everything that you can. If you can make it early and you can't make it on the day of, you can vote by mail, and it's secure and it's active and it's available and you can track it. And there's voter protection pieces that we want to ensure there's limited factors that are suppressing our vote, and somos lo único que nos podemos dejar contar, somos lo único que podemos hacer el cambio. Si dejamos nuestro voto en las manos de otra persona, vamos a tener las mismas cosas que nos está pasando con el presidente Trump. Necesitamos seguir hacia adelante, necesitamos proteger nuestras familias, y la única manera de hacer eso es votar por el vicepresidente Biden.
Bueno, gracias, Congressman Soto. Thank you, Representative Mercado. What a nice conversation. I'll see you guys on the ground. We have a very important election. We have our community that needs our help. So I'll see you there.
Gracias a todos. Recuerda para votar.
Bye-bye. So now we're going to have Gabriel Gomez. He's our organizer in Orange County. And he's going to be presenting our next speaker. So, Gabriel, if you can take it up from here.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Roberto. I want to say hi to La Comunidad Boricua. I am your organizer for the Florida Democratic Party here in Orange County. And I'm excited to present to you Stephanie Hernandez, who is our point of contact for voter protection. Take it away, Stephanie.
Hi, can you hear me all right? Hola, gracias por tenerme. Me llamo Stephanie Hernández y yo soy parte peruana y salvadoreña. Nací aquí en Miami y sí, tengo 22 años y solo quería hablar sobre mi trabajo que estoy haciendo ahora con el departamento de proteger la votación, perdón. Okay, so basically in June 2020, signed by Governor Wanda Vasquez, there was this law basically reversing the state's electoral commission procedures, allowing Puerto Ricans registered since 2012 on the island to vote. So basically, this is an expansion of vote by mail, and residents of Puerto Rico who find themselves out of the Commonwealth on election day will now be able to cast a vote by mail ballot, right? So what does this mean? Besides that expansion of vote by mail, there's also new ID requirements, and it's probably like very much more lax because it used to be an official ID issued by the state electoral commissioner, and now anyone who has a U.S. ID or any valid U.S. ID can register to vote by mail. But this causes a lot of problems because if you are registered to vote in Florida, islanders who cast vote by mail ballots in Puerto Rico or Floridians who vote here, but also vote by through vote by mail in the Puerto Rican elections, and return them to a U.S. jurisdiction, would consequently be disqualifying themselves from voting in the upcoming election. So you can't vote in here and in Puerto Rico. So basically, this poses a little bit of a problem because Puerto Ricans, they made up 62% of registered Puerto Ricans voted in the 2016 election, and we're en route to see that definitely get higher, and we're going to be having a lot more voter participation from the Puerto Rican community. An estimated 1,187,437 Floridians identify as Puerto Ricans. That's about 5.57% of the population. And in the past year, there's been a voter registration increase within the Puerto Rican community, and that's about a 30% increase in voter registration. So this is really, really big because we need to push these individuals to vote by mail, but only vote by mail in one election. And that's going to be hard unless we're doing voter registration education in Spanish, and really making sure that si tienes una pregunta, que llamas el número que ves ahí, 833-868-3352, y that number.
I think we lost Stephanie, but she was, there she is.
¿Me puedes escuchar? Okay, perdón. That number is super important because basically if you have any questions about voting, any questions of where to vote or vote by mail, or any questions about, I'm getting a vote by mail ballot from Puerto Rico, but I also just got one from Florida, go ahead and call us so we can make sure that we run you through these procedures of how to return a vote by mail ballot. A lot of the vote by mail ballots are turned in by the Latino community are thrown away at a disproportionate rate in comparison to white people or other minorities. But also it's super important because we need to make sure that we are educating the Puerto Rican community as well as the Latino community to properly filling out vote by mail ballots. It's very secure. You are allowed to track your vote by mail ballots now through your county supervisor of elections. So, there's been a lot of pushback from Republicans saying this is unsafe, we shouldn't vote by mail, but in fact, we definitely should vote by mail. About 70% of the Puerto Rican community has voted Democrat. And now that there is this push from the governor of Puerto Rico, to, I'd say, have Puerto Ricans here in Florida vote in Puerto Rico, our numbers of people voting Democrat may go down, in fact, and it may elevate Republicans who are voting for vote by mail to push Republicans to be in office. So it is a little bit of a danger if we're not doing proper education, and Republicans might use this as a ploy to throw away vote by mail ballots. And that's why it's important that we are doing what we can do on the ground, and that is why we need Latino poll watchers and Latino poll workers, people who speak in Spanish, to make sure that they are our eyes and ears on the ground. So what does it mean to be a poll watcher and poll worker? You are credentialed by the Florida Democratic Party, and what is allowed at voting locations. So if you see any voter suppression, voter intimidation, you call that number you saw on the bottom, 833-868-3352, super important number. And we also need people answering this hotline in Spanish. So if you want to volunteer and help work the hotlines for this upcoming election on August 18th, early voting, and the November election, please call this number. I answer, and I'll help you get set up. And we need as many Latino volunteers as we can, because there's a very big amount of Spanish-speaking individuals here in Florida. So if we don't have these Latino poll watchers and poll workers in Spanish, how are we going to answer questions? On voting day, we get thousands of questions. We get thousands of calls to this number, and we need all hands on deck, on the ground and on this hotline. So basically, what you can do as a Puerto Rican voter is to be informed. Most of these people who have been on the voting rolls since 2012 and moved to Florida don't even know that they're still on the voting rolls until they get something in the mail saying you are now allowed to vote by mail. So please work to educate yourself. I hope we're gonna be rolling out some material as to what to do if you receive both vote by mail ballots, and also just please make sure that you're not double voting. And we are going to do everything in our means to have people at the canvassing board hearings, in which we are going to have people fight and make sure that your vote by mail ballot is not being thrown away. We're going to have lawyers at every canvassing board here in Florida, and the canvassing board meeting is where the group of people decides what vote by mails ballots get thrown away and not thrown away. So we're going to make sure that if you have a Latino last name, or if something went wrong on your ballot, that is not going to be thrown away. And that is why we're also recruiting Latino lawyers and voters, of course, to support the Democratic Party in these efforts. So we have people at these canvassing board hearings, lawyers, Latino lawyers, fighting to make sure that these ballots aren't being thrown away. So please, if you want to volunteer, go ahead and call this number, and we're gonna have you set up and all of that.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was Stephanie Hernandez from our voter protection department. Your words are so helpful, ensuring that there are no barriers to the Latino community voting. But we do have to move on to the next segment. Now we're going to talk a little bit about our organizing efforts, both in Orange and Osceola County. Again, my name is Gabriel Gomez, and I am not Puerto Rican myself, but I'm no stranger to Hispanic community values and the struggles that immigrants face, when they immigrate to this country. I am so excited. I was so excited first to be part of this amazing event, and second to be tapped by Roberto as kind of the point of contact for Puerto Rican outreach here in Orange County. We have a lot of things planned for you. Two main things. First, we are ensuring that we are contacting the Puerto Rican community where they are, meaning we're making hundreds of calls every week. If you're interested in volunteering, I'll make sure to put the Mobilize link in the chat. We are making calls to ensure that Puerto Ricans are enrolling in vote by mail. And like Stephanie said, that's so important this year. She cleared up some myths about, voter or vote by mail being insecure. And we're working on the education segment. We want to make sure that the 15% of Orange County who identify as Puerto Ricans, meaning over 200,000 Puerto Ricans, are being shown, the credit they deserve. They are part of this community and they should be heard. Now I want to introduce Roberto and Luis from Osceola County, who can speak more on the organizing efforts there.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Gabriel. Like Gabriel said, we are working very hard to get that Puerto Rican vote out. Unfortunately, it's a community that for way too long has been and sometimes ignored, but not anymore. The Florida Democratic Party is doing a very great job on hiring Hispanics and making sure that they are where they need to be to talk to their communities. And Luis, if you can tell a little bit of the work we're doing, go ahead.
Okay. So, hi, my name is Luis Ferran Colon. I am originally from Puerto Rico. I just moved in, actually. So I'm here new to here to Osceola. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing specifically. So me and Roberto, we decided that we wanted to make this outreach focus on different age groups because our community reacts differently to the different cultural vibes setting our general pop culture. So we made two events specifically. One is focused more on the older, more, older generations of Latinos and Puerto Ricans here in Osceola and Orange. And the other one is focused more on the young people. And their names of these events is one is Cafecito por Biden and Birras por Biden. I'm going to talk real quick about Cafecito. Cafecito, the idea came because as Representative Amy said before, politics in the island is always about coffee and beer, basically. If you're walking down, asking voters to go out vote, that you will get invited in to have a coffee, a hit of alcohol. It's a very common thing, and with that, with that in mind, we decided we're gonna do this with this thing because it is a hook because people will recognize that this is meant for us Puerto Ricans, and we personally have a very, very, very ambitious goal that I will let Roberto talk a little more about that because he's the one that definitely has this goal in mind. And
Perfect.
so
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you, Luis. Básicamente, we are making a lot of calls. Every Thursday and Friday, we are having a phone bank event called Birras por Biden. We're basically, just yesterday, éramos como 10, 11 personas making calls to Puerto Rican households specifically to make sure that, one, they're registered to vote by mail, and two, that they're going to be supporting Joe Biden for president in November. So we are, si te llamamos, si estás viendo este live y de repente te llamamos, pues ya sabes que somos nosotros, Luis, soy yo, o son los voluntarios brutales, my amazing volunteers, my brother who's making calls, Aurimar, all the good people, Giovanni, and we have volunteers from New York, volunteers from Puerto Rico, volunteers from Boston, all making calls to make sure that our community is heard, that our community is taken care of, and to make sure that our community goes out and vote. Nosotros queremos que nuestra gente salga a votar y por eso los estamos llamando y estamos haciendo lo más que podemos para llegar a ustedes. Únanse a nuestros esfuerzos, que estamos haciendo un buen trabajo. Así que, Luis.
Ok. Gracias a todos los que nos están escuchando. I'm going to continue a little bit in Spanish as well. Ahora vamos a estar hablando con el presidente de College Democrats en Puerto Rico, del recinto de Río Piedra, Steven. Y he's going to be talking about how we have made the outreach to that specific community and how they are helping us out here in Osceola County. So, Steven.
Hi, how are you?
How are you? I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. So like you said, I'm Steven. I'm the president of College Democrats of the University of Puerto Rico. And I'm super excited about the partnership with the Florida Dems. And I thank every one of you for bringing us in because the Puerto Rican community, as has been mentioned this hour, is very important in Florida. And we are committed to help any way we can. As you know, here we are not exactly very used to do phone banking, but we're trying to create the culture of people calling from Puerto Rico to Florida.
Great. So how has the volunteers reacted to helping make calls to Puerto Rican households here?
Yeah, so the experience has been great. I think people feel a connection when someone from Puerto Rico calls them with their same accent, obviously in Spanish, even with the same area code. So they feel more open to whatever we are telling them, that we have to vote for Joe Biden in November. So they feel very welcome and they feel eager because they are eager to vote Trump out. Okay,
great. Would you have any idea of a funny experience you would like to share that we have? I have a few.
Yeah,
but
I mean, yeah, they sometimes when we call, as I mentioned, they sometimes believe we are like a family member because of the area code, and sometimes these are older people, so they talk more with us, and you know, it's a very good experience because they feel a connection with the island. And, you know, I'm very proud. And we are showing that the young people are not only the future, we also the present.
Great, great. Okay, so do you have anything else to add, like how the importance of, you know, mobilizing the Puerto Rican community here in Florida? ¿Por qué es tan importante que el boricua que vive en Florida le importe estas elecciones, salga a votar y mucho más importante, nos entendamos entre boricuas, que al final del día esto, pues, esto es por nosotros, por nuestra comunidad?
Claro. So it's very important, as you mentioned, that we we vote this November, and we're a very important and strong population. And I'm confident that Puerto Rican Latinos will vote for Joe Biden this November. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. It was a pleasure talking to you always. We both took classes together. So now start ending the event. I want to thank everyone that's been hearing us for the last 45 minutes or so. It's been a pleasure for me and Roberto and for everyone that has been participating. And I'm going to switch it over to Roberto. Sorry, Roberto, that's that way in my computer.
Estoy aquí. Yes, gracias a todas las personas que sintonizaron. Por favor, hay que trabajar juntos como comunidad para poder sacar a Donald Trump de la Casa Blanca. Please hit that subscribe. Sigan todas nuestras redes de Vamos Demócratas en Instagram, Twitter y Facebook. But before I leave, I have to say something because for me, this is very important. One of the main reasons I'm very interested in Puerto Rican politics and making sure my community is taken well care of is because of people who have paved the way y que han liderado los caminos. And I can't leave this event without saying that we have to honor Representative from New York, District 15, Jose Serranos.
Yes.
Jose Serrano from Puerto Rico, who has been in New York for 32 years representing his community in Congress. And he's retiring now in November after a long career of amazing policies and amazing job for Puerto Rico. So thank you, Jose Serrano. Thank you for all you do for our community. And just so you know, you have someone you have inspired, someone who has listened to what you have to say, and someone who was proud to say who has worked for you. So thank you very much. Thank you again to everyone who has come to our event. We're going to keep working to our Puerto Rican community. If you want to join the efforts, feel free to connect with us. You can follow us on our social media, Roberto J. Nava Alcina en Facebook. Puedes seguir a Luis Ferran también. And we just hope you guys enjoyed the conversation and that you guys are motivados para seguir trabajando. Así que por mi parte, muchas gracias. Nos vemos por ahí y que ganemos estas elecciones en noviembre. Bye, bye.
Biden 2020. Gracias a todos los que se sintonizaron en Twitter, Facebook, Twitch y las otras plataformas que pueden... YouTube, que nos puede estar olvidando. Gracias al congresista, a la representante y al equipo de Florida Democratic Party. Este evento no se hubiese producido sin ustedes, y gracias también a todos los que nos sintonizan, a nuestros familiares de mi vida de Roberto, porque sabemos que nos están escuchando.
Mami, que está por ahí.
Gracias, mami, que yo te lo envío ahorita. Y decidimos hacer este evento el 25 por la importancia de nuestra cultura, y queremos dejarlo saber que estamos aquí, estamos trabajando en Florida y estamos pensando en nuestra comunidad y en ustedes. Muchísimas gracias por su atención.
Bye, bye. Nos vemos.
Bye.